I just drove across the United States completely alone. All of this in a trip filled with triumph.
It worked!
Unlucky encounters, and many, many mistakes.
Can I see driver's license, registration, proof of insurance, please?
Yep.
Well, before we get too deep into it, a question you might want answered is, why? For starters, there's basically only 3 things you need to know about me. I make YouTube videos for fun. When I filmed this, I really needed a haircut, and I absolutely love driving places. At 17, I snuck away from home for a weekend and drove all the way to the great state of West Virginia. I spent the night in my car at an Ohio rest stop and then proceeded to have one of the most interesting days of my life while just me, alone with my dog, explored the entirety of the state. Months later, just 4 days after becoming a legal adult, I booked a hotel in Boston and had another one of the most interesting few days of my life. Look, what I'm trying to emphasize here is that I'm no stranger to solo traveling, or at the very least, solo road tripping. Anyway, cut to March 2023, where here in Michigan, it was cold, miserable, and my senior year spring break was coming up. Unfortunately, even though we only get one senior year spring break, the only one of my friends who wanted to go somewhere was someone who wanted to go further north, where it is even more cold and even more miserable. Naturally, I took the obvious next step and packed my things to travel across the country on my most ambitious trip yet. By this point, it didn't matter that I was alone because it was either travel solo or don't travel at all. So this video is the story of that trip. Enjoy. So I realize it's like pitch black out right now, but I figured I should probably record some sort of introduction. Today is Sunday, and I'm driving from my hometown just south of Detroit all the way to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The first 4 hours or so of this journey is spent driving down freeways I have already driven down many times before. The second half of this trip is spent driving through farmland. Voiceover Jacob here. I doubt you care to hear about any of this, so I'm gonna fast forward a little. I'm driving through Kalamazoo, Michigan right now. The last time I was here in December, I was actually visiting my ex-girlfriend's best friend's grandma on her father's side. Anyway, I was thinking I should probably summarize what this trip is gonna be. Thank you, Past Jacob. I completely agree. Anyway, I'm gonna keep this brief because I'll go into more details whenever they become relevant. Day 1, like I said before, I'm driving from Detroit to Sioux Falls, making just a few pit stops along the way, the first of which being in Chicago. Day 1, on top of being the longest drive of the trip with a whopping 14 hours, is also the most uninteresting day. Where it gets interesting is day 2, when I'm driving from Sioux Falls all the way to Laramie, Wyoming, while stopping at a couple monuments you just might be familiar with. On day 3, I'm conquering the Rockies and driving across Colorado to Grand Junction. On day 4, I'm further familiarizing myself with Colorado by taking a scenic route to a small town called South Fork. On day 5, I'm venturing into New Mexico all the way down to Albuquerque, where I'm visiting some filming locations of a very niche and unpopular TV show I'm sure you haven't heard of. Then I'm finishing the day off by driving into Texas and spending the night in Amarillo. On day 6, I'm going to follow the legendary Route 66 across Oklahoma, finishing in Springfield, Missouri. And finally, on day 7, I'm making the ending sprint home on another very long drive. In total, I'm traveling roughly 4,300 miles, and my bank account is going to cry as a result. Anyway, shortly after that last clip was filmed, I crossed the border into Indiana, otherwise known as the Crossroads of America. Called that because you have to drive through Indiana in order to get somewhere better. This is best shown by the fact that the only time I decided to film during the 45 minutes I spent in Indiana was when I was driving past the well-known city of
Gary, Indiana.
Thank you, in-person Jacob. Anyway, almost immediately after crossing into Illinois, I was able to see the great Chicago skyline in the distance. I'm getting into Chicago right now for the first time in 7, 8 years? I forgot to film myself getting into Indiana. I did film myself getting into Illinois though, but it didn't even say welcome to Illinois. It said welcome to Chicago, which, like, I don't know, Americans get it, but that could be really confusing for non-Americans, because I've met Christ knows how many people who think Chicago is a state, when it's just a city. Shortly after that rant was over, I pulled to the side of the road to take some scenic shots of the Chicago skyline. How nice. After this, I knew all I had going forward was empty farmland. So what could possibly be wrong with that? Oh no. So I'm still in Illinois. I'm at a rest stop called an Oasis, which confused me at first, but after spending hours driving through farmland, I can begin to see why this might feel like an oasis. For a while, I thought I was going to drive into some rain, but when I got there, it actually turned out to be snow, fortunately. And then it turned back into rain. Anyway, I think my next stop is going to be Madison, the capital of Wisconsin. And beyond that, it's just a lot of roadside attractions. Hello, and welcome to State Capitals with Jacob, otherwise known as my journey to visit and review every state capital in the United States. Today you join me on my first of 4 stops on this particular journey. Let's hear what I have to say in person. So I made it. This is definitely one of the more interesting state capitals I've been to, based solely on the fact that it can be viewed from any side. But beyond that, there's not much interesting. It's just another U.S. capital with a big dome. Thank you, Jacob. Anyway, I rate this capital 7 Green Bay Packers out of 10. And in terms of my ranking, it fits nicely between West Virginia and Wyoming. On that bombshell, thank you for joining me on this edition of State Capitals with Jacob. After leaving Madison, I had quite a lot of driving through farmland before I would eventually reach my first roadside attraction. Unfortunately, since this was only day 1, I hadn't quite gotten the hang of regularly recording B-roll footage yet. So the clips of me driving here are going to be a little sparse. I did, however, manage to record some pretty hills nearby Wisconsin Dells that broke up the monotony of driving through more boring farmland. However, I didn't film again until I eventually crossed the Mississippi River into Minnesota. Shortly after, my dash cam caught an RV driver nearly running somebody off the road. And finally, I reached my first roadside attraction, a giant Spam can right next to the Spam factory in Austin, Minnesota. Let's hear what I had to say about that at the time. I am just gutted. I am crushed right now. I get off the freeway in Austin, Minnesota, just to see a giant Spam can. And I drive all the way to the Spam Museum in Austin, Minnesota, and what do I find? There's no Spam can. So I research it, and where is it? It's actually at the Spam factory, not the Spam Museum. So then I drive all the way to the Spam factory in Austin, Minnesota, and what do I find? It's locked behind a gate. There was no way I could take any pictures, no way I could film the Spam can. My first roadside attraction, and I'm already disappointed. I'm heated now. This has ruined my mood. That's okay, past Jacob, because while you may be angry now, I promise you'll find a way to make up for the Spam incident later. Anyway, the next roadside attraction was, okay, So this guy is called the Jolly Green Giant. He was originally created in 1925 as a logo for the Minnesota Valley Canning Company, but he eventually became a symbol for both the aptly named Green Giant Company and just healthy eating and food habits in general. So they built a statue of him in his hometown of Blue Earth, Minnesota. Hang on a moment. The Minnesota Valley Canning Company was founded in Le Sueur, Minnesota, a solid 55 miles northeast of Blue Earth. So why is there a statue of him here? Well, because a radio presenter was worried the construction of I-90 would reduce business in Blue Earth, so he attempted to fix that problem by luring motorists in with a roadside attraction. And I guess his plan worked because my dumbass was here, and I supported the local Dairy Queen by buying an ice cream. Regardless, the next thing I knew, I was crossing from Minnesota into the one and only South Dakota. And it was on their welcome sign when I saw it for the first time. Mount Rushmore. The most American tourist attraction there is. Literal carvings of our presidents made from high explosives on stolen American Indian land. Chef's kiss. It's just perfect. So perfect that South Dakota made it their entire identity. From license plates to road signs literally hundreds of miles away, you can't go a second in this goddamn state without George Washington side-eyeing you. It's odd to me too because South Dakota has two national parks, one of which I visited, that are significantly more interesting than Mount Goddamn Rushmore. Anyway, none of this matters since Sioux Falls is on the border and I'm about to check into my first hotel. I just checked in. This this is not an empty room. This is somebody's room. I just checked in. This is the room I'm supposed to have. What the f? Hopefully this one won't be occupied. Oh, thank God. You know what? I never thought I would have to use one of these. I always laugh. I'm like, they're false security. What's the point? The point is if the front desk gives another person your room, I've never even had anything similar to that happen before. The dude's watch was out. He had like a money clip out. I could have stolen all of his crap, but I didn't. All right, this is a very nice hotel room. It is a Holiday Inn though, and I did pay about $140. It only goes downhill from here. Okay, so yeah, I actually want to talk about that really quickly. Basically, when I solo travel, I try to keep expenses down to an absolute minimum. My little jaunt over to West Virginia only cost $180, and when I went to Boston, the most expensive thing there was the $90 hostel. Now, when planning my trip out west, I really wanted to sleep in my car and maybe even camp once I got down south. But unfortunately, my lovely mother had only just recently learned what I pulled the previous year. At 17, I snuck away from home for a weekend, so I didn't want to cause her a panic attack by sleeping in my car hundreds of miles away at rest stops. Saying all this, I am a legal adult and this didn't stop me from going on a solo camping trip a few months later. But at the time, I had only been 18 for 4 months, and seeing as this was my most ambitious trip, I didn't mind the extra comfort. Despite saying this, day one is far from over since my early start and lack of stops meant I got into Sioux Falls at only around 6 p.m. And there were a few things I wanted to do first. I didn't plan to stop here, but it was definitely worth it. I mean, look at that. That's beautiful. Even if it does have a rundown South Dakotan city in the background. But I mean, that down there, that's beautiful. Smells like meat. It's not bad. And I can understand why someone might utilize that for flavoring in some way. Anyway, this mess. So tomorrow, we're going from here in Sioux Falls to Laramie, Wyoming. The problem with that is just straight driving, non-stop driving, is 11 hours. Right now, I have it that I'm going to leave at 8 a.m. Now, today, I left at 4:30 a.m. My projected time to get here, no stopping, you get the gist. My projected time to get here was 3:30. I got here at about 5:20. So, in just one day, and arguably today had some of the least stops out of any day, I still somehow managed to gain 2 hours. So I think what I'm going to aim to do is, instead of leaving at 8, I'm going to leave at 7, and I'm just going to try not to dilly-dally when it comes to getting gas and getting food. Anyway, I'm going to spend the rest of the night doing... yeah.
And brings her beauty to a bottomless day. She's bathing al fresco.
Miles and miles and miles of farmland. I'm here right now at the one and only Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. You know, sometimes I wonder, imagine like you're from here, right? And you're having a conversation with someone and you ask them like, you know, where are you from? And they tell you, they're like, oh, I'm from Mackinac City, Michigan. You're like, oh, that's interesting. And they're like, yeah, you know, we got one of the biggest bridges in the world. You know, it spans 2 peninsulas. It's an engineering marvel. And you're like, that's crazy. And they're like, so where are you from? And you tell them, you're like, I'm from Mitchell, South Dakota. And they're like, oh, you know, I've been to Sioux Falls a couple times. What's in Mitchell? And they're like, we got a building made of corn. And they're like, oh. And you're like, yeah, it's called the Corn Palace. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, I think it would be humorous to leave it at that. The history behind this building is actually really interesting. To preface, I already did something similar with the Jolly Green Giant, but I want to warn you all that there's going to be a bunch of very brief video essays throughout my journey. I think travel vloggers often focus too much on just what they themselves experience. But to me, half the fun of traveling is learning about the history of the places you visit. But if you just care about me, and these essays aren't your thing, I've organized this entire video into chapters so you can skip around as you please. Anyway, Mitchell, Corn Palace, history. As anyone who's looked at the billboards across I-90 would know, the Mitchell Corn Palace is often advertised as the world's only corn palace. But believe it or not, it wasn't always like this. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, farmers used to construct crop-based buildings across the Great Plains as a way of not only advertising, but also showing off the culture of the region. In fact, according to the Wikipedia page, at the Great Plains peak there were 34 corn palaces dotted across the US. Today, only the one in Mitchell remains, but it stands as a monument representing the deep history and culture of the Great Plains. A monument so important that over 500,000 people visit it every year. Especially in 2008, when it received a visit from a presidential candidate you just might have heard of. Anyway, as I was in a rush to get to Laramie, I never actually stepped foot inside the Corn Palace. But if you're still interested, a YouTuber much bigger than I'll ever be, named Ted Nividson, made a video about this very place. Although I will warn you, his opinion on the palace is a tad more critical than mine.
It's like the one thing that you're absolutely not surprised exists in South Dakota. It's pretty much exactly what you expected it to be. It's a building that's covered in corn husk.
Anyway, as I continued driving west, the snow started to disappear, and I really got a sense of how desolate this whole region is. It wasn't until I saw a sign for a, quote, scenic overlook that I decided to pull off I-90 again. I've spent a while now driving through South Dakota, and something you should understand is that it is very, very flat and very, very boring. So when I saw a rest stop with a sign that said scenic overlook, I mean, I was surprised. Like, what is there to overlook? A cornfield? But then I pulled to the side and, well, you've probably seen hints of it now. Look at that. Oh, that is just stunning. Look at that. As much as I enjoyed the Missouri River, my next stop was Badlands National Park, and I wanted to make sure I got there before it was too late. Unfortunately, on my way out, I realized something that could turn out to be a disaster. I have gone proper panic mode. Okay. So, my wallet's gone missing. I know I bought at the Corn Palace. So I didn't leave it there. I didn't think I brought it out with me here. I wouldn't have a reason to. I didn't buy any food. How the did I lose my wallet? It's not in there, it's not there. It's not there. I must have dropped it. Must have been like when I tried to film, it fell out of one of my pockets. Alright, it's searching time. For context, I think I should note that I was so convinced it was at this rest stop because I only noticed it was missing when I was on the entrance back onto the freeway, where I then had to pull a very dangerous and very illegal U-turn in order to get back to the rest stop without driving several miles down the road. Unfortunately, despite my frantic searching, all while this statue of an American Indian was looking down on me judgmentally, I was not able to find my wallet. Or at least I wasn't able to find it on the ground. You just added so much more time onto my journey. Oh, now he's stuck under the chair. You piece of shit. Well, I'm the idiot. I was looking all around. I couldn't see it. It's only when I came back that I saw it. Now I know what you're thinking. Jacob. Why spend so much time on something so inconsequential? Well, here's the thing. Just because I found my wallet didn't mean it was inconsequential. Because I spent 20 minutes looking for my wallet. 20 minutes that I could have spent at a national park or at Mount Rushmore. But instead, now I have to rush to get to Laramie. The worst part? Once I got on the freeway, what was I greeted with? The nice, relaxing, enjoyable sight of even more farmland. I mean, I just got in, but already, look at that. And I gotta go there soon. It's a shame it's freezing. So yes, after a long few hours of driving, I finally made it to my first national park, Badlands, in western South Dakota. To be perfectly blunt with you, there wasn't much to do at Badlands. Most national parks have particular sights to see or several hiking trails, but at Badlands you are basically presented with a long road and lots of turnoffs. It's It's not like there's anything wrong with this, though. You see, Badlands is often described as having the landscape of an alien planet. And I will attest, I have not been anywhere else in the world that looks quite like Badlands National Park. Unfortunately, good times for me mean uninteresting videos for you. I spent most of the visit just gawking at the scenery while driving through bendy roads listening to your dad's favorite classic rock hits.
Sweet things from Boston, so young and weird.
Eventually, I finished the drive and left the park. But by this point, my new ETA for Laramie was 5:40, and I noticed some fog rolling in. And then it started to snow. And then the fog got really thick. The fog was concerning, of course, not only because it makes driving difficult, but mainly because my next stop required a clear view, at distance, of a mountain. The snow, on the other hand, was light, barely impacting my driving. And why should it? It's late March, and they don't have snowstorms this late in the year in South Dakota. Right? Well, you'll just have to keep watching to find out. Anyway, before driving into the hills for Mount Rushmore, I made a quick stop in Rapid City to get lunch and talk about my previous experience with national parks. Okay, I remember being so proud of this clip. I thought it would be funny to film in front of a giant quarter pounder, all while eating a quarter pounder at the same time. It only took one take, too, for me to say all my lines. What I wasn't aware of at the time was A, how much the wind at Badlands f***ed up my hair, B, how a bit of mayonnaise got stuck on my lip at one point, and C, how I actually completely f***ed up my lines and forgot to say part of what I wanted to say. For those reasons, I'm going to retroactively reshoot the clip 6 months later. I'm here right now in Rapid City, South Dakota, standing in front of the world's largest quarter pounder, weighing in at approximately 500 pounds. Anyway, so Badlands was nice, a little windy and a little overcast, but it's easily one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Speaking of that, prior to today, I had only been to 3 other national parks: Cuyahoga Valley, Rocky Mountain, and New River Gorge. And out of those 4, I would easily place Badlands National Park right at the top. There truly is nowhere else like it. I really wish I had more time to go on one of the hiking trails. But anyway, it looks like visibility is improving and snow is slowing down, so I should have a beautiful view of Mount Rushmore. I am here at my favorite monument built on stolen American Indian land. The view, I mean, look at that. The view is just stunning. I don't think I've seen anything better in my life. It's truly breathtaking. I think I shed a tear earlier when I first came in. I mean, just look at that. If only. And so I left. I had places to be, of course. Specifically a hotel in Wyoming. So I couldn't just sit there waiting for the fog to dissipate. But this meant another scenic drive through the stunning Black Hills of South Dakota. Genuinely the most beautiful place I had been to thus far. Other than Badlands, obviously. Well, through the hills I went. And when it started to snow, I didn't worry. And then I drove into a blizzard. Just a pleasant drive, you know, lots of ups and downs, ice all over the road, low visibility, and my car. Well, my car, it's a compact, low clearance, no snow tires, and absolutely no all-wheel drive. Just exactly what I want to be in, driving down a mountain during a blizzard.